Thanks for joining us on this episode. I'm Jamison Ritter with CPPS, and today we're going to talk about TRM, or Travel Risk Management. Kind of want to get into maybe the top 2 or 3 things you think every travel risk management program should be thinking about. Corey, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, travel risk management. I really enjoyed this subject. I think something that travel risk managers and organizations need to make sure they do is make it specific to the areas that they're going to be traveling to. And I know that might seem obvious, but we see so many organizations that will come up with a particular policy or a plan or even a procedure of how it's going to operate. And there's so much more to it than just telling your people to, travel in pairs of twos and don't go out after dark and only go to these couple restaurants. There's just so much more to it. It needs to be very specific to the area that you're going to. So having that information, that knowledge, that research of areas before you go to is important. And with that, training your people to the specific areas that they're going to be traveling. It's a lot different to go from Nigeria and Mexico, completely different places. So you can't have a generic procedure or protocol that you're going to try to apply to both those, right? What is your threat going to be when you go to a particular area? Is it going to be criminals? Is it going to be, terrorist organizations? Is it going to be cartels? I mean, look at the news right now. Like, it's very obvious that travel in Mexico comes with its own unique dangers that people need to be aware of. So make sure you train your people very, very specifically to where it is they're going to. Nigeria, it's much more realistic that they would have to be concerned themselves with terrorist organizations over a cartel. And then probably even more to the point is eventually you're going to need to talk about foreign government detention, right? What is it going to be to get detained by a foreign government? Because that's going to pertain no matter where you go. Some of those places that's going to be a little bit more significant than others. But, is the government detention more likely to happen as you as an individual or because you happen to be like part of an organization? So people need to know exactly how to respond to each of those.
Yeah, I love that because, there's these different issues where you travel overseas and some folks, let's say you go into a country and you're just going through entry processes and they pull you into a secondary conversation. Some people, without having that understanding, they're like, well, I'm detained now, right. Where it's like, okay, not quite, let's slow it down. Sometimes that's just normal process. Like for Americans, that's pretty routine. You try to come out of Israel or go into Israel or, whatever country, but that's one that is known for U.S. travelers to have some extra questions be asked of them going in and out of country. It just really helps provide that context and helps provide assurance that you're going to be okay when you're traveling, because even some countries, like I spent some time in Ireland, and even basic things, you're not prepared to drive in a foreign country like that. You get on the other side of the car, you get on the other side of the street, and it's like, that's a totally different game. So being able to equip travelers so they're ready for that kind of stuff, just making sure that it's like, okay, there's a spectrum of issues you can be up against here, but it's that preparedness piece that's so critical.
What do you, just for both of you, what do you see for really, really good forward-leaning mature TRM programs? Are there a couple of elements that you'd say, yes, you're doing this right, you're thinking about it the right way? Or is it easier to say, what are companies missing or organizations missing when they do this? I'll take either one.
One of the big things is it goes back to, we talk about this for a lot of different issues, but from a program management perspective, that cross-functional commitment, that cross-functional collaboration and functional input into managing this program. So often it's a travel manager might be tasked with this as an additional duty onto what they're doing day to day. Or maybe there is a corporate security element or somebody out of a security operations center is kind of taking the primary task for these things. But you have the travel manager working on the expense management piece. You have somebody in the HR shop that's worrying about insurance. And all of these things, they're managing components of this process and never the twain shall meet. And it's like, well, my goodness, if you have some of these different individuals going around the country, we want to make sure that they have a full understanding, and that starts with the management of the program. So, it's not that we're trying to necessarily bring ownership under one function, but if we can get some collaboration between these functions, one, it can help create where we're not having these turf wars between our function. Like, everybody really values their budget, right? Where it's not the issue, but how can we bring these different functions together to have a unified approach to make sure the traveler is looked after, because it's the traveler that's going to be experiencing the risks, not the individuals sitting behind the four walls.
So it's more about the traveler and their personal needs and trying to address what they need when they're on the road.
And that's the point I was going to make. So that led into it nice. I appreciate that. But making it traveler specific. If it's, we have a client that does call centers in Central America. They send mid-level management to Guatemala City, and they stay at the same hotel. So there's a very specific plan for them. And you can't necessarily apply that plan to executives travel into Egypt to look at factories. Largest denim factory producer in the world. Didn't know that until a couple weeks ago. But executives had to go there to take a look at the factories. That is an entirely different animal that you're looking at. One, where they're going, obviously, but two, who's traveling there. You could take executives flying into Egypt on private jets. That's going to be looked at very differently than they are even in Nigeria or something like that. Especially if you're a part of a large organization. There's some smaller areas, let's say take Africa for example, there's some smaller areas in Africa where if they saw a private jet flying in, well, that's their entire economy right there. Like, that's the one that's bringing all the resources, all the money to a particular area, and they wouldn't get messed with ever. Like, okay, those are the guys that you don't want to mess with. They're the ones that are putting food on our tables at night.
Sure.
And then there's, you get to other parts where it's like, okay, this big private jet's coming in, executive production teams getting off that airplane too, and they see it as these are the people that have been exploiting us for the last 50 years. So making it very person specific and area specific is extremely important.
Yeah, I worry, like a lot of things in corporate America and large organizations, it becomes a checklist, or, hey, there's 10 elements to risk. You've checked 4 of them with this particular trip. Here's your output, or here's your risk mitigation strategy. So it doesn't have a lot of realism or doesn't speak to the individual. But we've got it. Hey, you're going to Central America. Here's the printout from the State Department on the risks in traveling in Central America. Here's a number to call if you get in trouble. Very basic stuff. But how often do you see companies doing what you're talking about, making that personal, making it about the individual traveler? Are we seeing that transition now from kind of the check the box, the risk management, or is this still something in process?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the nice thing is a couple of years ago, we had a new standard that was released to kind of help give people I hate to say measuring stick, but something that they can really benchmark to, and that's ISO 31030. It was an international standard. It was the first of its kind published for this issue, and is really a great guide to help organizations understand what should we truly be doing in this space. Because, the issue in this industry historically is organizations that self-assess, they tend to do pretty good, but you kind of pull the lid back on some of these different things. It's like, oh, actually there's some issues here when you get some outside eyes looking in. But it's layered. There's organizations that have a lot of support capabilities in place. Do they speak to each other? Do they work together? And are they operationally effective? That's usually where the wheels start falling off. We might have an assistance provider. We might have insurance to indemnify some of the risks. We might have maybe traveler training. That's usually one of the biggest gaps. We might have some intelligence capabilities. There are a lot of different things that are support mechanism, but the biggest gap, like Corey was talking about earlier, is it's the focus on the traveler. When we're looking at the individual traveler that's out there, looking at these things, it really helps bring context of how we leverage all of these different issues for the safety and security of the traveler and the accomplishment of objectives for the organization as it relates to business travel.
Yeah. I think in my experience, the trend that we're seeing right now is, and it maybe has to do with the amount of just the unrest going on in the world right now, but the travelers themselves are demanding it. They're demanding the training. They're demanding the
Big time.
help. And even to the point where the call center client that we have doing business in Guatemala City, his story goes, you know, they go down there, they stay at the hotel every morning, they get on the bus, they go from the hotel on the bus to the call center, back to the bus, back to the hotel. That's their routine, which routine isn't always great, but that's a whole other thing. But there was a particular time where they get on the bus and they're on the way to the call center. The bus gets surrounded by motorcycles and people with guns, and they're trying to get the bus to pull over. The bus driver pulls out a gun and just starts shooting at the motorcycles as they're going down the road. And it escalated from there. Motorcycles end up taking off, and they go about their business. There's a dozen people on that bus that are absolutely traumatized, and they're going back to the organization. They're saying that we're not going to go back there until you give us some training. One, make sure you guys know what you're doing to provide us all the tools. But like, what do we do in that case? Like, what if that bus driver had pulled over? Like, was it the right thing to do? So they're insisting that they get some of that training. Like, what is it we need to do if those people pull over? How do we increase our survivability there? So I think there's just industry-wide, I think people are demanding a little bit more of that training going right now.
I think that's great insight. And last question, just kind of a lightning round. If you had one piece of advice for a client on TRM, what would it be? Just one, just do this if you do nothing else.
That is a lightning round. There's so many different things that you could say there.
No doubt.
And really, it kind of goes back. I want to give you something new other than what's already been covered. And I think it's do your research. Do your research and actually have a plan for where it is that you're going. Consult with some outside people, whether it's us or anybody. Just know the environment that you're getting into and what the threats actually are. And don't try to go with the generic plan for everything.
Okay.
I'd say go to the standard. If you're unfamiliar with 31030, ISO 31030, it's a great beginning resource. And, you know, yeah, of course, secondary to that, I'd love folks to reach out to us because we can really help them and make what may seem complicated quite simple. But if you had one thing to start with, I'd say start with the standard.
Okay. Well, this has been a really great conversation on TRM, some really great learning points and everything else. And thank you for all your insight. If you have any more questions and you want to learn more about TRM or anything else that we do here at the center, feel free to reach out to us directly. Obviously, you can subscribe to our info letter at the center. Like and share these videos and connect with us on social media. We're happy to continue the conversation there. Thanks for coming.